Hello and welcome to a discussion of the Sandman. With me, I have two people who I have the incredible honor of discussing a favorite story with. They changed how I read about 3 years ago, and I'm very grateful for that. I look at like themes and deeper insights. So I'm getting a lot more out of the story than I read it the first time, and I'm really excited to be able to discuss it with AP and Philip Chase. I'm sure everybody who's watching this probably knows who you are, but would you like to quickly introduce yourself just in case? Let's start with AP.
Well, firstly, Varsha, thank you very much. And also, I am deeply sorry that we have changed how you read.
Oh, in a good way. In a good way. If that
We
wasn't
have made
clear.
it more miserable for people, which is never our intent.
No, in a good way.
So, thank you very much for inviting me on. My YouTube channel is The Critical Dragon, and I talk about narrative and how narrative is presented in different media forms.
In film, television, and in books.
Well, thank you very much from the best of fantasy. Oh, hang on.
Uh-oh.
Hi, I'm Philip Chase, and welcome to my channel, The Best of Fantasy.
I should have known better.
But definitive proof.
Oops.
It's
Oh, no.
it's just an empty head. That's all that Philip is. He's an airhead.
Put that thing back on, AP. You never looked better. Oh no. That is we should give credit to Don Mates and Jenny Wirtz for this creation, I suppose. Credit or blame or whatever you want to call it.
This is a Don Mates original, like handcrafted by Don Mates, who is a famous artist, has done all of these amazing book covers, and now Philip's head.
That's got to be worth millions, probably.
Well, to me, it's priceless, my friend.
Well, I'm glad you've been well armed by our so-called friends out there. By the way, I'm Philip Chase. The real Philip Chase is here. No, it's here.
Arguable.
I got the name and everything. So, and I'm very happy to be here, Varsha. Thank you for inviting me and the Nemesis. And I'm so excited to talk. We're into, I guess the way I have it is bound up and everything. This is starting the second book 2 or whatever, but we're doing issues 21 through 25 today. And I'm really excited because that's the start of what looks like to be a fairly cohesive arc within the Sandman. So yeah, I'm really excited.
Yeah. So we start with a chapter where we meet more of the Endless family, starting with Destiny walking the endless maze where it reminded me of a few Borges stories. But what was I going to say? Yeah, we first met Destiny in the foreword of the second book. If you're reading these editions, he does the recap of the first volume. So we met him there. But if you didn't read that, then this is the first time we encountered Destiny and some other members of the family. So who wants to go first to start us off? Maybe Philip, because AP got to do the introductions.
Oh, that's true. Okay. I don't have a ton to say about this section. It was interesting to meet Destiny, and I guess he is the eldest of the Endless. Is that actually possible if they're all endless, though? I don't know. I mean,
Delirium's tragedy is that she's the youngest.
Would there be an older or a younger if they're all endless? I don't know. But anyway, AP is going to answer that, I think.
Well, in some ways, it's slightly arbitrary. But in other ways, if you think about it in terms of what they represent, and then because they have defined that thing, what is diametrically opposed to it, which is also then defined in the negative. So in order for free will to exist, in order for things to exist over time, the concept of destiny has to exist because there has to be a passage of time. And so for anything to exist within time, you have to have destiny and its opposing force, free will. And then for things to be alive, you have to have death. For things to be created, something else must be destroyed. And then once you have consciousness, you have the definition, like with dream, of things that are unreal and the things that are real, and he deals with an aspect of the unreal. And so like you can work through how each of them kind of are created, and it could be like a split instant between them. But it's the same with twins and triplets, that they'll always go, I'm the eldest, by how long? Oh, about a minute and a half or 5 minutes, so I think it makes sense. But one of the things I really loved about this was in almost in that opening section, there's a little bit of exposition text on the image of Destiny walking through the garden, and it says, "Walk any path in Destiny's garden, and you will be forced to choose, not once but many times." So the idea that our lives are this movement through time, and we are constantly making decisions, and that's what Destiny's garden is reflecting. The paths fork and divide. With each step you take through Destiny's garden, you make a choice, and every choice determines future paths. So again, it explicitly goes into this of making this what would have been a nice subtle metaphor, is making it very blatant.
Yeah.
But it's about every choice in our lives, and as we move forward, that leads to more branching choices and more branching choices. And then the bit of it that I really, really liked is the third text box, and it says, "However, at the end of a lifetime of walking, you might look back and see only one path stretching out behind you, or look ahead and see only darkness." And what I love about this is we make all of these choices. We do all of these things, but when we look back, we see that long continuous line of our lives, not in the same way that Destiny sees it, as this branching of past, of possibilities, of things that could have been. And like Philip, you'll know this from your medieval studies, the old style of map, that it was the map of the journey as a single path. Whereas, we're so used to, oh, you turn right and then you have to rotate the map, and then, you turn left and you rotate the map back. And they were going, no, you go here, and it's just one long strip, because they reorient everything as you're constantly moving forward. So the directions all fit with that.
Yeah, not only that, but in medieval times, they had these mazes as well, like the maze that Destiny has. And these mazes were made for the purpose of contemplating one's life path, which is very similar to the concept that Gaiman introduces with Destiny. Another thing that I liked about this section was how he does pair some of the siblings. So Desire and Despair are twins. And of course, they are mirrors of each other in some ways. They're opposites in some ways. Their personalities are very opposite, but they seem to also, on some level, they seem to be in cahoots, if you will. So I like that. I also think it's interesting how you have Delight. Once upon a time, Delight is now Delirium. And I don't know yet, because I haven't read enough to know, but I assume at some point we're going to find out how Delight became Delirium. Maybe not. This is Gaiman, so who knows? But but I do like the idea that somehow Delight became Delirium. That through, this is a world where there's a lot of the time Delight does turn into Delirium. And that is a interesting character introduced. And then there's one missing sibling, a brother, is all I know. I don't know what D letter he is, or why he left, but they make reference to that, and I assume that has to come up again at some point. So
because they call him the prodigal.
Yes, the prodigal son or prodigal brother or whatever. So yeah, I mean, not son, because there's no parent involved here, I suppose. So a prodigal brother, I guess. But yeah.
And I thought one of the things that I loved about this, it sets up, like, this is very obviously a prologue to a much longer narrative. And I think this is one of the reasons why this particular sequence is so prized, because it reads as a long story rather than, the issue of the week. What is the thing being solved this week? Longer form storytelling. And it's a lot of fun. But in this, we have that the personalities and the dynamics of this incredibly dysfunctional family. And we see them sniping at each other, and then the different relationships even within it, because we see that Dream really respects Destiny and Death. And vehemently dislikes Desire
Yeah.
and, you know, tolerates the others. Like and he's portrayed as very stuffy, very duty bound, and much more like Destiny, whereas Death seems much more easygoing and tries to mitigate things. And yet, when Desire tries to keep pushing and pushing, Death sort of is like staring at them, and it's like, don't push me on this.
You're talking about the death stare.
and you see Desire realizing that they have pushed things too far, and they immediately sort of take a step back to it, because, you know, you can mess with Dream because, you know, what's Dream going to do? And it's fun to poke Dream, but Death will end them. And because they're anthropomorphic representations of concepts and ideals, and it's something revealed in the sequence of Seasons of Mist, if one of them dies, another version of them will be created.
Right.
But will, you know, essentially just replace that one, and they'll be in the same order, but they'll be slightly different. And I thought that was the first reveal of this in this whole sequence of expanding the cosmology and tying these big concepts into something so individual and very, very relatable in terms of family dynamics and squabbling siblings and the petty motivations, which, you know, again goes back to like the Greek gods and the Roman gods, and the fact that they are so very human in their pettiness when they are these beings of incredible power.
Yeah. I really like the descriptions of the Endless. I think that was one of my favorite sections. And the fact that Death did not get a description was just, and then there was Death, and that was it.
Yeah.
I thought all the descriptions were very beautifully written, and then there was Death. That's all of it.
Did you like that moment when Death arrives and she's wearing the comfortable like jeans and sort of 80s 90s outfit, and Destiny's like, you need to dress more formally. She's like, fine. And she appears in these big robes. She goes, what's next? You're going to want me to be carrying a scythe?
Yeah. That was funny.
There's a lot of humor wrapped up in it. I really enjoyed that. Like, she's such a brilliant character.
And it's interesting that Death, who's usually, I guess, even in Discworld, is portrayed as this like heavy, weighty character who, you know, has his moments of fun. Death has a lot of comic effect in these in this particular story, I think. A new topic, sort of, about the maze. Um, there were two additional interesting things. One, that Destiny uh, doesn't, the maze doesn't branch out, or he doesn't have to make choices in the maze. He just walks the maze apparently, which I thought was interesting. I'd like to discuss that a bit further. But the second aspect, which ties to a later story or later chapter in this volume, is that apparently you continue walking the maze after death, which was interesting because in hell later we see that people choose what punishments they get. So yeah, I thought those were two very interesting aspects. So yeah, I wanna talk about the Destiny not being subject to the maze a little bit more, because he is making decisions throughout it. He's calling his family, and he's asking them to change how they appear and so on. Those seem like decisions to me. And maybe the maze is about not decisions on such a small scale, and maybe they're wider scale decisions, and that's when you walk different parts in the maze, and those where your choices happen that change how your life looks. Or is it like, you know, Destiny is some is a four-dimensional being who walks a different maze that doesn't affect this one? Yeah.
The first thing I'd like to point out in regard to your question is there's a book that is chained to Destiny. And this is important, I think, because as a symbol, Destiny as an entity, he talks, he seems to be able to make decisions, interact, that sort of thing. But there is something permanent about a book where something is written down. And indeed, when the three fates or Norns or whatever we want to call these three that keep coming up throughout and seems like they would have an interesting relationship with destiny as well, but they seem to be somehow lesser than him. I haven't figured out the hierarchy there really, but anyway, they show up and they say, hey, you better take a look at your book. Something important is going to happen. And he's like, oh, well, he looks in his book and, oh, yes, indeed, I better call a family reunion. So the book plays a role too, I think, because how many traditions is there this idea, and of course these would be post-oral cultures coming up with this notion of something being permanent because it is written down, the permanency of the written word, which is a big part of the magic of the written word. And so when you see, for example, people have this notion of, of Peter at the gates of heaven and looking in the book, oh, yep, you're here. Yep. Okay. You can come on in, that sort of thing. So I like that Destiny's, and it's chained to him. So there's a notion there that Destiny doesn't have really much choice. The chains to me suggest that there's an element here of destiny, of fate, of something that cannot be altered because of the way he's shackled to this book. So I feel like Gaiman is kind of playing both sides a little bit here with this presentation of Destiny. I'd love to hear what AP thinks about that.
Well, we all know that in high school, Philip's permanent record was established, and that's when he first turned to evil in the dark side. And if you ever speak to Santa and you go the naughty list, and they go, well, actually, the naughty list is just Philip Chase, like it's an entire library. But I think part of what you're talking about here is exactly right. The book isn't actually separate to Destiny; it is part of Destiny. Right. He isn't making choices because he looks in the book, and why is he calling the family meeting? Because he called the family meeting. That book is everything that happened. The reason he doesn't make decisions, the reason he doesn't choose paths, is it's already been decided what path that he walked on, because he's Destiny. And so he is following a predetermined pattern, and he just is doing it rather than making any decision about it. And then even the whole idea that Destiny is blind. He's not looking into the future. He is just, what he is doing is what was preordained, and it's written in the book. And of course, it's one volume. I don't care how small the font size is. That's every single decision of every single being in the universe is recorded in Destiny's book. It's representative. And yeah, as you point out, he's chained to it. It and he are joined together because he is the personification of the entire flow of time. And therefore, he doesn't get to make things. He mightn't in the moment know what is going to happen next, but he knows whatever he does was already preordained for the thing that he was going to do. He calls the family meeting because he had called the family meeting. That his relationship to linearity and causality is slightly disconnected. And, they sit down and he goes, well, no one's allowed to leave yet. Then Dream goes off onto the balcony to have his little whine about nada. And, Death chastises him. So Dream leaves, and then Destiny goes, oh, well, no one has to stay now. It's all been done. It's everything from Destiny's perspective is it's happening as it happened. So it's kind of weird. Moore played with this a bit with Dr. Manhattan in Watchmen. The idea of experiencing time outside of the linearity through which we process time. And it's, being present in all moments all at the same time. But because we are beings that move through time, we see it as progress, whereas they are present at every single moment that it is occurring. If that makes sense. Kind of.
That makes sense. But also, I always have trouble wrapping my head around, like, there's this overarching being who is, well, who knows everything that's about to happen. And yet people are able to make choices. So are those things preordained too? And are they written in the book? Well, I suppose there's also the fact that the book is apparently a guide to the maze. So it's writing down the choices and all the branches so people can still choose how they navigate the maze and come out at various endpoints. So I suppose Yeah, okay, he's got the whole tree structure documented in the book. I can buy that. Yeah, but what he does himself is, yeah, is pre-written. There was also the not so maybe circular aspect of the fact that the fates came and told him that this is something he needs to do, and then he took action because of that. So the prophecy is the event that triggers the events the prophecy is about, which, like, again, I find that fascinating when that's explored in a story, which I think this is doing. It's deliberate. It's not, I forgot that, that I had this prophecy and I'm making the prophecy trigger the events. It's deliberate that the fact of the prophecy is making the events happen, which also it's
Macbeth.
interesting.
It's like Macbeth. If
Mm.
Macbeth hadn't met the three witches, the three fates. But if
Yeah.
Macbeth hadn't met them, heard the prophecies, then he wouldn't have done the things that he did in order to bring the prophecies to fruition. And so it's baked into this that this foreshadowing becomes, well, it's not quite prolepsis, but the foreshadowing and prophetic thing becomes self-fulfilling. But even with this, so Destiny meets the fates, and they give him this prophecy. But the thing was, Destiny was always going to meet the fates, and they were always going to give this prophecy. So it's not it's and so that prophecy was always going to happen.
Hmm.
Because I think one of the ways that I tried to wrap my head around stuff like this a while back was I thought, in a film, you're watching this film and the character is making decisions, but you're outside of the flow of time of the film. So
Mm.
you can pause and you can rewind. Now, if you rewind and you go back, you know exactly what that character is going to do, but the character still goes through making the decision.
Hmm.
So even though you know what they are going to do, they still are making a decision and a choice, even if you know what it's going to be, because you've already watched it. So if you're outside of the flow of temporality, if you're outside of the flow of time, looking at it, you can look at any particular section. So if Destiny is essentially operating outside of space time as we know it, and only sort of dipping in to interact with beings who process it that way, he doesn't see it as never having a choice. It's like, yeah, there were choices made, but they are always going to be this choice.
Hmm.
And knowing how it all works out in the end, he has the cheat notes. Um, that's kind of how I tried to wrap my brain around this stuff a while back. That beings that are outside of the perception of the flow of time that we see it, it doesn't remove agency. You're still acting in a certain way, still making those choices. Just
Hmm.
because someone outside of time knows how those choices end up doesn't mean that you didn't make the choice at the time.
So the other one other important thing I want to just make sure we make note of in this part, which is really the setup for what follows, is we've talked before about the moral. I guess I don't know if that's the right word or not, but the development of compassion within Dream, and we've seen an evolution in Dream where he was an entity that was capable of some cruelty back in the day, which is what happens to Nada when just a wee bit. Yeah. I mean, yeah. So, and now having gone through some things, having been imprisoned and, various little adventures that we've seen up to this point, we see Dream and having this friendship with Hob, which I think is really important. He does say goodbye to Hob when he is, we'll talk about that later, but when he's on his way to hell. He's developed compassion and suddenly confronted by one of my favorite characters in this whole series really so far is Death. And Death just tells him, like an older sister, you screwed up, buddy. That was really dumb what you did. That was pretty callous. He's like, oh, yeah, I guess I better do something about that. So that's an important scene for me, just to see once again. All right, here we have Dream developing something, a conscience, compassion, what have you, a sense of he's becoming more human in a way. So I really like that moment. I think it's important.
And what is so interesting about this is, he argues with Death, like, and you two, you're taking Desire's side on this. Well, hang on, Desire was kind of right about this because you were an ass. Like, you did treat Nada really, really badly. You think I acted dishonorably? it still doesn't occur to him. People are pointing this out to him like, you really think? And of course, then Death suggests that part of Nada's fixation on Dream and Dream's response to it was nudged by Desire. Like, Desire was interfering and trying to set all of this up. But what I liked later was there when Dream is addressing the inhabitants of the dreaming, and he says, "It has been pointed out to me that I may have acted hastily, mistakenly, wrongly. That what I did was not honorable." And it's even now, even after like I decided to do it, it was pointed out to me that I may have been like he still hasn't accepted. Yeah, I was an ass. And so like trying to steer a ship, trying to change a personality that has been fixed in place, as Lucifer says, for billions of years, that Dream has been like this. Because Lucifer even says to him, like, you remember me when I was still Lucifer, the morning star in the Silver City. Like, you remember me then. What was I like? And, you know, that is how old Dream is. To try and, like, I have bad character habits that I have picked up over the years. Imagine how many you would pick, how entrenched you would become in how you do things after a few billion years. That's what Dream's trying to try and change.
I mean, at a certain point, you do learn some wisdom, though, right?
Well, I haven't.
Any? Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead. Maybe.
No, I was about to say. So I think like a lot of these issues, like this section that we're looking at, in terms of like the big narrative event, there aren't that many big narrative events. You could summarize the plot events like very, very quickly about what's going on, and yet there are some really important moments and revelations, I think, about the characters. But Barsha, this is your discussion, so like what would you want to talk about next?
Oh, we could move on to the next chapter if we don't have more points about this one, in which Dream bids goodbye to everyone in his realm, and also we get a brief glimpse of drama queen Dream, apparently.
Yeah.
Oops, sorry. Oh,
That's what we're referring to.
yes, that's the plan.
And like I said, it's the one pose I think of Dream in the entire run that it's look at me, and I can't help but read it in that. But if you turn the page and look at the splash that they do, and you go, that is this brilliant image of Dream walking out into eternity. Like, it's a stunning image, and then I flip back and I look at me, and I'm going, oh, how can these two images coexist right next to each other? But I will say one of the things that I liked here is
how he flies too, like a bird.
Oh yeah,
or a giant bat.
Yeah,
he's Batman. But I love how Dream makes this determination, and so he calls everyone to him. And you think the last time that we saw something like this was Lucifer calling all of the demons of hell to witness the competition, and how all of this started with Destiny calling the family together. And then we see Lucifer telling and basically calling all of the demons of hell again to go, you're all out, we're done, I'm closing up shop, see ya. And so there are all of these moments that are really nice sort of reflections of earlier moments and tying into things where we see this someone making a decision and then the ramifications on everyone else being played out. And these people, these almost omnipotent beings making decisions, the ramifications of which are paid for by others. But I think that is a big point that sort of comes across in all of this. The amount of power that these individuals have and how it is their dictates. We even have when Dream summons Lucian and Matthew, And Matthew's going, I didn't know he could do that. And then as they walk out, well, the boss wants to talk to us, kind of thing. And I think he wants to talk to everyone. And Dream has just summoned everyone and gone, right. And he's sitting on his chair. He's depicted almost as this gothic villain, like with the skulls and the candles. He's cosplaying as Poe. And despite the fact that we want to like him, he actually comes across as sinister and high-handed. It's like, I'm going away again, and you better not misbehave the way that you did the last time. And it's this awkward movement between, are we meant to see him as a benevolent character, or are we meant to see him as, in some ways, malevolent? Or are we meant to come to the realization that he is neither? He is simply Dream. And we can't apply these things to him because he has a function and a role, and he is duty bound to perform certain things. And that means he will always act in a certain way. Morality is not a consideration of his. Morality is not part of dreaming.
I thought that was interesting too, how he mentions, if I don't come back, if I'm somehow killed by Lucifer, then some other entity will take over the role of Dream. And so it's,
you mean if he loses his head?
Yes, if he loses his head. So that suggests that that Dream, the abstract concept, is something separate from Dream, the individual who is evolving and learning to be more compassionate. And that this other entity would kind of like start from scratch, maybe. But Dream also says I could be captured, in which case I've made some arrangements. So I thought that was interesting. But yeah, that the abstract concept exists separately in a sense. Like Dream will go on. Whatever happens to this individual, let's say corporal representation of Dream, corporal, probably not even that, but this particular representation, this incarnation, let's say, of Dream, whatever happens to it, Dream will go on, as a concept.
Dream is dead. Long live Dream.
Yeah.
The continuation of the role of Dream, it will always be done. And it will always be an articulation of that concept. But we don't know yet how much of that would be shaped by whomsoever the new entity or the new version is going to be. But we know that the endless can change because delight became delirium. So we know there's possibility of change at this point in the series. So they're not entirely fixed, that there seems to be something that can affect them. But we do know that they are constants. They are constants in the universe. And Dream even says there's basically only two beings more powerful than him. The one who created everything that resides in the Silver City, and Lucifer. That's it. That's a very short list. Which, on the one hand, sets up Lucifer as far more powerful than we would have potentially considered Lucifer to be, but also outlines how powerful the Endless are if there is no one above them apart from those two. They're in the top 10 most powerful entities in the universe in existence. The tier ranking video is going to be very, very short, and it's not going to change year on year because it's always going to be them. And so it was fascinating because we get that even the point of connection between Dream and Lucifer is drawn even more starkly, because who does Dream send as an envoy to Lucifer?
Yeah, Cain. Yeah.
And Cain, with we get the little the story about God marked him so no one else could harm him, so Lucifer couldn't harm him. But of course, the biblical allusion and Cain being the first murderer, all being tied to Lucifer. That all of these connections between the two of them, we see these connections between their realms and how they conduct themselves. And it's interesting that Lucifer speaks in the plural, because Lucifer as ruler, until Lucifer decides to retire and becomes I. And it's the transition, and it's a really nice transition. Unfortunately, again, it's signaled very, very heavily because Dream has to point this out. But it's a nice little subtle transition. And we see that Dream kind of moves between that of Dream the person or Morpheus or Oneirus and the role of Dream and being of the endless. That there seems to be a sort of movement between different personas that he assumes.
Yeah, could we talk actually, Varsha? Is it okay if we talk about Lucifer now? Because I feel like that it would be logical at this point. And the fact of the matter is, the entire time that Dream he arrives in hell and there's nobody, it's abandoned, and then finally meets Lucifer, and Lucifer's, yeah, I decided to call it quits. Packed up my bags. Almost everybody, just got a few strays to get rid of. There's always a student taking taking a little bit longer to finish the exam. So he has a few demons and tortured individuals, and explaining, by the way, also I thought that was brilliant, that hell is where people go because they expect to be or want to be punished for their sins. I thought that's something we could talk about too. But I don't trust Lucifer. I don't know about you guys, but I don't really trust this game that was going on the whole time. He's like locking up all the locks. I'm thinking, Dream, hello, this is not good. Your little antenna need to be up right now. And then when he has him cut off his wings and everything, I'm like, Dream, don't do it. No, this is some kind of irrevocable act of something you're going to regret, So I don't know what it is yet exactly, but the whole time I'm thinking, no, Dream, you really shouldn't be just playing. It's like, really? I mean, Dream seems so naive through this whole thing.
But was he naive? Because he arrives in the full regalia wearing his helm.
Yeah.
And Lucifer's like, take the helmet off so we can talk face to face. And Dream's like, no, not doing it. He's like, what?
Right.
He's like, well, I'm scared of you. Like,
yeah.
And he's, okay, what if I and Lucifer makes a promise that he
when you're inside hell, I won't. I mean, that's so clearly one of those promises, right?
And okay, yeah. Because as soon as we read that, we're like, we've read all of the stories about how you make your wishes and making them very specific and what someone promises. Right. And is it the letter of the law or the spirit of the law? But it's at that point, because this ancient promise, this pact is made between these regents of these monarchs of their realms, that this is a binding agreement. So Dream goes, oh, okay. And the helmet disappears, like MCU, the Marvel CGI nano helmet fades out of existence. Whereas the rest of the time he's walking around with it tucked under his arm and has to put it on. And here it just fades in and out. But I like that he extracted the promise of safe conduct before he was going to let his guard down. And you go, in some respect, very, very canny. Not paying attention to the fine print, Dream, go to law school. The fine print is really important. But Varsha, what did you think about all of the different gates to hell? Because there's one of them I really, really liked.
Interesting. I liked this one the best. And I can't say I paid a lot of attention to the others, but this one I had to stop and show my husband too when I was reading. But yeah, which was the one that you meant, AP?
Wait, I just have to grasp this concept that AP has a preferred entrance to hell.
Well, wait. You get used to going in and out one way. But as it's going through, like, you see the sort of the biological ones and like all of these. There's one that is a very shallow wall with a little gate in it. And of course, if you've read Stardust or even seen the film adaptation, the Town of Wall, and it's the division between the human realm and the fairy realm. And of course, in certain mythologies, the fairy had to pay a tithe to hell every year. So I like that little reference, which in it's a little tiny Hadrian's Wall with a gate in it. And it was just so much fun that was one of the gates to hell. But the one I particularly liked was the CEO's office. He's in like a businessman's office, and it's just this corporate office somewhere, nondescript, but it's clearly like one of the high-end offices, and it's the key to the door, and you're like, oh, hell from CEOs, and it was a nice little dig.
Oh yeah, I have to go back and look at all these pictures again to see what the kids. I wasn't paying attention to them, but this is really good. I found the wall one. If I can make my camera. Nope, wrong
in the
direction.
bottom right there.
Yeah, there we go. Cool.
But it reminded me of Stardust, and I thought that was a nice thing that Gaiman developed years later. But oh, sorry, I forgot to tell you one of the things I laughed at, and I shouldn't have laughed, was when Dream entered hell, and he's like, I have to find Nada, and he's thinking, and this is where she is. So like he appears there because basically hell is an infinite space, and you need to know where you're going, and as soon as you know where you're going, that's where you appear. And what does he find there? Nada.
Okay.
And that's why I laughed, because, and I went, and it's one of the reasons why in my head, I think quite often I change her name to Nala
Mm.
rather than Nada, because I keep going, it can't be Nada because that means nothing. And it was so bad. Like he arrives there, no one is there, so he finds Nada, but he was looking for Nada and she's not there. And I'm like, oh no, don't, there's bad puns in my head.
Just I had forgotten that she was Nada too. I thought it was Nala. I don't know if it was a plant from our last discussion, but I went in thinking Nala and I was surprised at Nada. But that's a great joke. I like that.
I'm sorry.
So
Just
I
make nothing of it.
See,
yeah,
I thought
nothing.
Philip was going to be very disapproving there about the pun. And no, he just was sitting there to try and think up another pun to add.
Of course.
Of course. The nothing between the worlds, that's pretty cool. I think we're on the right page when he flies through and the description of how he feels and how cold he feels. So to your point again, AB, about how powerful these people are and something that's making them feel cold, that must be terrifying too. So yeah, I love that the nowhere and then he arrives at where and at the gates to hell with that magnificent picture. Yeah.
And I think obviously where Dream is in the void and he feels that temptation. And that it's one of the things that I liked about this. Dream is not infallible. Dream, he has personal motivations and personal fallibilities. And he feels the temptation before going to confront Lucifer. And again, because of the little biblical allusions all the way along, it's a nice tie-in to the testing of Jesus Christ in the desert and the temptation of Christ. That again, we have, here's this powerful Lord being tested in this way, and it's, will he hold to his duty? Will he hold to his faith? Will he go through with this thing that he believes is ultimately going to be very painful and destructive and could end him? And it was quite nice. But clearly, Dream could learn a lot from Philip, because I know Philip can survive at those temperatures with his tweed jacket up in the north.
So that's all he was missing, a tweed jacket.
Yeah,
We've got
he
the
would have
mask,
been
we got
bundled
the
up
jacket.
absolutely fine. Oh, the void? Nothing. I got my tweed jacket on.
Would have made his life a lot easier if he had tweed. Yeah. Forget about the helmet and all that stuff. It's just all you need.
So about what you were saying, Philip, the fact that people come there of their own free will and they choose their punishment. And I guess the tie back to the maze, which I guess I was confused then, but it was clear now that people still walk the maze after death too. Um, yeah, I thought that was very interesting. For me, I was talking with a friend a few years ago and she used the term outsourced morality. And I think people tend to blame the demons or Satans or whatever for influencing their decisions, but it's them making the decisions all the time. So yeah, I thought that was a really interesting concept that's explored
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, I mean, you have Lucifer quoting Milton, which I thought was just fantastic. better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. But there's another little concept that Milton explores that is voiced in a way by one of the two little boys that we meet later on, which is this sort of, he innocently observes, well, I just think hell's like a state of mind. It's not really necessarily a place, right? And yeah, I love the concept that hell is this thing that we've essentially, I mean, kind of invented in order to, on some level, punish ourselves because we feel that we deserve it. And you saw that when Lucifer's trying to get rid of that guy who's got his, he's got all his little chains in all parts of his body and everything else. And he's like, well, I did all these horrible things. Look at me. I killed my mother and I fornicated with my blah, blah, and all this and that. And it was just all these long catalog of horrific things he's done. And so now I deserve this. And finally he gets dismissed and he disappears. But the idea that, it's a place that we invent for ourselves. It's deeper than just simple masochism, I think, but it does say something really, I think, profoundly true about human nature, that a lot of times the weird things we do, we're trying to justify stuff that we think ought to be done to us, or stuff that we've done. So I just find that fascinating, a really great insight in terms of the way people are.
I will say again about the Milton quote. Again, it was one of those really lovely moments because you all read it and you go, oh, I recognize it as Milton, and yet he had to go ahead and say, oh yeah, I didn't say that, Milton did, and he was blind. You're like, we know, we've read it. We know who Milton is. You don't have to. That's I think one of the things about some of the stuff in the Sandman, that every once in a while there's something clever, and then there's the let me explain to you why this is clever line that comes shortly afterwards. And I really wish it wasn't there, because there are these really nice moments, like Lucifer quoting Milton, who had put those lines in Lucifer's mouth. That's fun. But then pointing at it, you sort of go, yeah, but can you trust it up, leave it up to us, trust us that we will pick up on this. And that would be my one minor, again, the Sandman. I love the Sandman. I am a huge fan of the Sandman. I have the absolute editions in addition to other collections of it. But that would be like one of the minor quibbles I have with a lot of this, is sometimes I think that Gaiman doesn't trust us as reader quite enough. It's a very minor quibble over something that I really love. Like even the cutting off of the wings and making Lucifer mortal or semi-mortal. The reduction, like he's fully now divested himself of a lot of his angelic lineage. And that's symbolic, the cutting off of the wings. Like that's so well done in this. And it's so brutal because we see the knife, Mazikeen's knife that Dream uses. And it's horrific and grisly. And this is what, Dream is, well, okay, I'll just, and then I'm going to cut up the steaks later on and maybe a side salad. It's treated so matter-of-factly. And again, I think that gives us insight into Dream, that again, this is a role, this is a function. You just do these things. That's what I like. And that it's not explained. But
Yeah. And I think maybe we can talk about the demon boy story, because it's sort of hopping off of one of the topics that we just discussed, which is hell is a place that you make for yourself. And then we can come back to the consequences of being handed over the keys. But yeah, just a quick point that I want to make about that before we move on to the boys. The other demon with the pins and whatever chained to the rock, that guy, Lucifer, the way he tells him to leave because nobody remembers his crimes anymore. And same with the boys, the ones from the army, they have all this guilt apparently for all the crimes they committed, but they go to hell and they find out that nobody even noticed that they did all of this. So it's interesting. I guess one way to look at that is perhaps that when you do things that aren't nice or evil, can be classified as evil, like you hurt yourself more than you hurt anyone else around you, or maybe as much, maybe not more than, but as much, which I think is a point that both of these are making. But also the other question is if nobody remembers that you did evil, is that still evil? Which I guess Lucifer is saying it's not, but
If a tree falls in the wood and no one hears it, did it make a noise? You're like, yes, it still
yes.
made a noise. You didn't have to record it for it to be a noise.
It does remind
Not
me
on
of,
Instagram.
it reminds me of Shelley's poem Ozymandias. You know, the concept that, hey, look on my works, ye mighty, and despair, and you know, and I'm such a big cool guy. Look at this statue of me, and who the hell remembers you now, dude? You know, so it's just the idea that, look, we're mortal creatures, and we can't always. I mean, it seems like a lot of our existence is struggling with the idea of mortality, and that some people find some fairly unhealthy ways to make their mark in the world. And so I feel like this is a
Yeah,
brilliant.
they start up YouTube channels to talk about books. Like,
and then they get a nemesis to make it even worse. So, but yeah, no, I mean, these kids in their own petty, bullying way are doing something. I love the parallel you made, Varsha, because they're doing something very similar to what that guy. I forget his name, but that, which is fitting that I've forgotten his name actually. So,
is it like Brucellus or something?
yeah,
Beshrao, or I can't read my handwriting, but I think it's Beshrao if that's an H.
I mean, it's a strange name, but anyway, yeah. I mean, this is the things that we do to make our names live on, and there have been all kinds of responses to mortality, but a lot of people have tried to do some larger than life things. But the ultimate truth is, we're all headed to the abyss one way or another, and so that doesn't seem to be a very meaningful way to squeeze a name for yourself, or to do harm to others, or to be a dictator, or take over the world, or what have you. But these are things that you see again and again and again. But yeah, I love that. I love what Gaiman seems to be playing around with there.
And I think one of the interesting things about it is, bizarrely enough, it's a slightly optimistic view of humanity. That deep down inside, no matter how evil someone is, they know that they deserve punishment for doing wrong. That people are aware of it. And I think modern psychology might disagree slightly and say that certain people are absolutely unaware that what they are doing is evil. So is a sociopath going to, wind up in heaven and St. Peter go, well, you don't feel that you murdered all of those people. Yeah, but they deserved it. Yep. And you feel no guilt whatsoever. Work away. So heaven's full of sociopaths and hell is full of people going, oh, I cut that person off in traffic because I was in a rush and I feel really bad about it. I need to be punished.
Oh, that was you? Was that you? Oh, I knew it.
Listen, I learned to drive in America on I-95 in Florida. If I go anywhere else, they're all going to go, oh, Jesus. But it's interesting that part of this is wrapped up in quite an optimistic view of humanity, that when we do something bad, for whatever reason, that we realize that it is bad and that we realize that we deserve to be punished for it. That humanity has an innate morality, and we have been given free will to choose things, which is this wonderful gift and power. But we've also been given a moral compass to tell us when our choices are wrong or right. And I think that's actually a surprisingly positive view of humanity. And it's a far cry from hell as other people. That would be another way of looking at this. But, we look at so many of these characters that end up in hell, and they go to hell because they believe that they deserve to be there. And, that's, I find that interesting, because we have met people in this world. We have seen in the history books people in this world who are absolutely convinced they did the right thing, and what they did was horrendous. What they did was monstrous. And what this sort of model posits then is, well, do they just get to go elsewhere? they don't have to go to hell. They get to go to the fields of paradise, the Elysian fields, or the Silver City. Well, actually, no, you can't go to the Silver City. No one can go to the Silver City. That's just, where the angels hang out. But some form of heaven. Do they get to go there because they feel no guilt? Is morality simply about guilt? And that, it poses an interesting question. I like that there isn't a definitive answer, and I like that it's something that, philosophers have been arguing about the origin of morality and where it comes from and what this all means. And so, again, one of the things that I love about literature is when it shows us things, poses positions, asks questions, because it makes us think more deeply about it in our lives and the things that happen in our world. That, to me, is one of the great joys of literature.
I agree. I don't have more points about these two stories, so should we do issue 24? I think.
Yeah. Well, that's a quickie, and just to go over the main points there. One of the things that I thought was cool about that was the obvious fact that I can see the seeds of American gods in so many ways in this portion of the Sandman. And so we do see Odin and Loki, and of course there's the whole story about Loki finally causing so much mischief that the gods essentially chain him up in a cavern with the guts of his son, and that his wife has to stand with a cup over him because they tied a snake over him that drips venom on him, and when she has to empty out the cup, that's when he shakes and there are earthquakes. So Gaiman is using that myth in this story, and having Odin visit Loki and say, "Hey, a little opportunity has just come up here, and I think I want your help." So that was cool. And then they collect Thor because they need some muscle, I guess. And Odin doesn't quite trust Loki, so he's going to have Thor be his watchdog. But essentially, this part is all these gods and entities. You have chaos and order and various pantheons saying, "Whoa, there's some major real estate that just opened up because Lucifer has decided to just abandon hell." So everybody's showing up in Dream's realm to say, "I think that should be mine now." So you have a lot of claims, including some demons that used to live there and are now like, "Hey, we're going to make a better hell 2.0."
It's going to be democratic.
Yeah. I mean, they do sound a little bit like a little fascist, maybe, a little sort of populist vein in there, maybe. I don't know. But anyway, so all these entities are ready to line up and stake their claim. And so that's basically what goes on here. I don't know if you want to add anything, AP.
Well, Phil, I was going to ask you, when Odin, we see Odin, and again, Odin comes across as quite sinister, and depending on the different stories that you have read of Odin or how he's been adapted into more modern storytelling, Odin's not typically presented in the modern day as quite as sinister as he is in a lot of Norse mythology and in the legends.
He's a trickster god. Yeah.
And he's not a particularly nice guy. But one of the things that really struck me about this is Odin waltzes in and goes, "Right, Loki, you're coming with me." And Loki's wife just sits down, and her entire existence, Loki's the one imprisoned. He's imprisoned there too, because her entire existence is filling this bowl and emptying it. She is just as much a prisoner. She is just as tortured as Loki. And that shot of her, well, she's just going to wait until Loki comes back, because that is her entire existence.
Yeah.
And you can see how emaciated he has been drawn. And that moment where Odin has no concern for her, Loki has no concern for her. No one cares about her.
Yeah.
But the narrator, the narrative position, makes sure to focus on her, to show the reader, don't make the same mistake that Loki and Odin make. Because here is a person. She is confined to this hell. We've just seen that hell has been closed up. This is her own personal hell. And she is going through it every single day. And I thought that was actually quite a powerful little moment in it. Because if the story had just followed, and then Loki and Odin, and they meet Thor and they get the goats and they go, da, 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 you know, that would be a much more traditional focus for the story. But this was like, no, there's another person here.
Yeah.
And deliberately drawing your attention to her and the suffering that is physically manifest on how she looks.
Yeah.
I thought that was a very powerful moment.
Agreed. Yeah, there's some nice attention to detail too. Like this shot of Loki here, you can see the scars around his lips because there's a story of when he once had his mouth sewn shut. The dwarves had made a wager and they won Loki's head. But he said, "Well, I didn't let you have my neck, so you can't cut off my head." So they sewed his mouth shut. So there he has his scars there. I thought that was a little nice nod. But yeah, Gaiman does love his mythology. That is clear here. Yeah.
And was it in this one? Oh yeah, it's when Dream tries to contact Death. And Death's like, I'm kind of busy.
With this one, yeah.
And so you have, and we know that Death can be many places at once. Death has said this before, that she is many places at once, but she's like, I'm really busy right now. Is this important? And Dream's like, well, Lucifer handed me this key. He gave me hell. And she's like, yeah, I know. I'm dealing with all the ramifications of this.
And the other important point in this here is that Nada has been imprisoned by the demons, like Azazel and company, in order to, they've made her a bargaining chip in their claim on hell. So, yeah.
And that obviously connects back. I like, just to return to that point, I like taking those moments to focus on the fact, again, ramifications. These powerful beings make decisions, and it's the mortals, it's the ordinary people who end up paying for them. And they're tied up in their big drama. Dream needs to talk to Death, and Death is going, I'm really busy because the dead are coming back and they're appearing everywhere. I need to go and deal with this. But okay, sure, let's talk about your drama. And we see the ramifications of that in the next episode, or the next issue, where, in the boarding school. But there is this focus on, even when Dream is talking to Hob, when he goes to say goodbye to Hob, and he goes through other people's dreams, and he finds the bottle of wine that Hob had once talked about, or is a great to give to Hob so they could have a glass. And there's the toast Hob gives is kind of prophetic as well.
Yeah.
But then when Hob wakes up, and the bottle is next to the bed. But again, it's this impact on the little lives, and the ones that they choose, they go, oh yeah, well, I like this person, they get special treatment. The rest of you, nah, they are meaningless. They don't care. And it's fascinating seeing that illustration of these characters that we are following, that we want to like. We want to like Dream, but his callousness towards those he rules over in the dreaming. He just tells them, yeah, I've just decided this is going to affect all of you. There's no consultation. There's no, I appreciate this is going to be a bit awkward. No, it was a threat and a warning. Don't misbehave like you did last time. If I get captured again, I am going to get out again, and I will come back, and I will be very, very annoyed. He was threatening them. But his favorite pets, he picks out. He picks out his favorite pets, the ones that he likes, and treats as special. And so it complicates his character. It's not simplistic. It shows these flaws. And again, I think that's what makes him much more compelling than if he had been outright a good guy who occasionally made mistakes. It's like, no, he's a tremendously flawed being and looks at the world and at reality with an inhuman lens. And we're trying to understand his perspective, because what we go, how could he have treated Nada that way? And his siblings even call him out on it. But to him, he's going, okay, well, if you think I acted dishonorably, then I will go and fix it. Not even the realization I acted dishonorable. Well, if you think it was dishonorable, I will go and fix it, because other people's perception of me, particularly in my family, is important, not what I actually did. And you just want to gently shake him a little bit. Or when he goes to see Daniel, he names the baby Daniel,
Yeah.
Hippolyta's son.
Yeah.
Was that because the baby is called Daniel, Dream knew that and revealed the name? Or was it he just decided to name the baby Daniel, which is like, God is my judge, which coming up to a confrontation with Lucifer was quite interesting.
Yeah.
And again, being high-handed, like just walking in, well, I just wanted to see the child, so I just appeared. It makes Dream difficult to like in the usual ways, and yet makes him very fascinating as a character study.
Yeah, you can see his avoidance too when all these entities are showing up, and he's kind of pouting and all right, fine, let them in, and they're all piling up out there. And there's the gate that you recognize from earlier episodes with the dragon and the griffin and the Pegasus. So that's cool, right? Yeah. But
And
yeah,
I like that they are constants. No matter what way we see the entrance to the dreaming, we see those constants of those guardians. They were in the Dream of a Thousand Cats. They were the guardians outside the cave because that's how the cat perceived it. And there are certain constants. When Matthew flies to see Eve, did you notice Eve, when she is outside the cave, is this hunched over old woman? But as the panels transition, she turns into a young woman. So Eve, in some respects, is like the Fates, the crone, the matron, and the maiden.
Yeah.
That she's represented, and again, tying that all in. There are lots of little points of connection within the stories, and the repetition of symbols and symbolic representations across things, and the re-evocation of this gives it a sense of cohesiveness and a sense of continuity that quite often we don't see when you don't have a single writer or even a single writer and artist team working on a long sequence. That one of the benefits of the Sandman. It's like when people talk about, like, say, Chris Claremont's run on X-Men, because there was a single authorial sort of voice behind it, there's a level of development and cohesiveness to these characters. And then when another author takes over, another writer takes over, they move things in a different direction because they have a different vision. But the Sandman as an entity, just because so much of it was from Gaiman's vision of certain things, it allowed for these developments backwards and forwards through the text.
Yeah, I really like that we got to revisit a lot of the characters that we saw before, that we are trying to close out the Nada thread, because that felt like something that was important when we first encountered it in the first volume that we read. And then that we're following up on it. That was meant, we got the backstory, and then now we're following up on it, and sort of, I hope we'll wrap this up again. And we got to see Hob again. I liked that. And about your echoes of the previous themes and stuff, there was one thing that reminded me of a bit from the first story. The boy, when he talks about walking through the mazes endlessly, and there's this thing that's chasing him, and he knows that even when he turns around the corner, that he will still be like, he can't escape. That reminded me of the recursive dream in which the son of the original villain in the first book was stuck in which he wakes up, he realizes he hasn't woken up, and then he wakes up again, and then he still hasn't woken up. So that the recursive nature of that with this endless nature of this, I thought that was interesting too, the parallel there.
Yeah. You were talking about Edwin Payne, right? He's the boy who was in hell and was freed along with everyone else, and he joins Charles Rowland in the last episode. That's not the right word, but issue. The last issue that we read, which I thought was cool. I mean, it's sort of a side thing going on here, but the repercussions from the emptying of hell are basically being played out in our world before us, with the main setting being this boys' school. And you can see some traumatic experiences, perhaps. I don't know if Neil Gaiman went to a boarding school or not, but there was some serious bullying going on, and also the very out of touch headmaster, and so on and so forth here. But it was kind of neat to see this friendship form between these two boys amidst all of this chaos and danger. And the fact that one is essentially dead and the other becomes so, but and this resolution that they come to at the end to, hey, let's just leave all this behind. We've got life, or is it death? Whatever, let's go live,
Yeah.
So I love that, how that part ended. Yeah, I don't know what you guys have to say about that, but.
Well, and that it's essentially the origin story for what is a spin-off show on, I think it's going to be on Netflix this year, the Dead Boy Detectives.
Wow.
But what I find it interesting about that is when people talk about J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter and the British boarding school, what Gaiman depicts here is closer to what a lot of the boarding school than Hogwarts, which is a wee bit friendly. Although admittedly it has a high mortality rate as well, because health and safety doesn't exist in the wizarding world, and clearly no one comes into, oh, did you lock up all of the lethal things that kill children? No, you're a school. Yeah. Okay, moving on. Like there's your inspection. But if anyone had read, I think it was Roald Dahl wrote an autobiography, or at least semi-autobiographical story, talking about his life and going to boarding school and what that was like. And we see a lot of that represented. And there's like an entire library of school days novels that replicate a lot of the public schools and the private schools. And seeing that contrast between the cultural beliefs of like the late 1800s, early 1900s versus where we are today, when we look at what these people are doing and how they act and the various things that they say, and it's shocking to us. And we realize that, quite often we look at the world and we go, we have not moved far enough. And, we can see problems with the world and we need to do better. And sometimes we lose sight of how far we've actually come and how much these things have changed for the better. Now, that doesn't mean that we rest on our laurels. Like, there are still major, major problems. But I think it's important not to lose sight of the fact that, yeah, like, we have actually come some distance.
Yeah.
And I think seeing that juxtaposition of people representing those attitudes placed in the modern context where we can understand them, and that jarring dissonance that's created. And it sort of reveals to us that, yeah, times have changed. Like even the headmaster sitting smoking a pipe. Yeah, you couldn't do that in school these days. Smoking a pipe in school? I assume that you have one of those pipes that blows bubbles. But it has the bubbles that come out of it because you put.
Oh yeah. No, but I love the one kid from the 70s who says, "Hey, well, what are we going to study? Dead languages?" And then the headmaster throws something at his head and his eye pops out, and he says, "Get a haircut,"
But also, they ask him how he died, and what was it? It was booze and pills or something.
Yeah.
But even that, like having these representations of the different time periods, how things have shifted, these cultural norms that were, in some ways, cataclysmic shifts from the previous era, and then having them all together shows that jostling of these different ideas.
I like that. I didn't think of it like that, but yeah, the progress aspect of the last story, that is very interesting.
And of course, Death being run off her feet, being a bit busy. Which,
oh yeah, in the runner's clothes.
And that blending of humor into these stories that are deeply sad, deeply horrific. Like the Sandman, in a lot of respects, is a horror comic, but it's not horror in terms of slasher or the jump scare. It's horror in terms of these are disturbing thoughts and concepts that are being played out, disturbing realities being played with. And the Vertigo line had a lot of horror titles in it. That's why people were reading them. But those moments of humor to it give us that momentary respite and take the sting, I think, out of some of the most pointed remarks and challenges to it, because some of these people are just monsters. And we see that they, the three boys who then turn on each other.
Yeah. Eastman and Barrow and Skinner. Yeah.
Skinner.
I love, though, at the end, the image of these boys. They're leaving a gate behind. Sort of like the gates of hell, you know, and they're leaving, though. So I love this this image and the idea that they're going to go live, you know, or, you know, whichever it is, death or life, you know, they're embracing it.
Freedom. They were bound in their lives. They were bound to these roles. They were bound in this horrific situation. And they chose, no, I will not do it. And they chose a sense of freedom. And they leave. They leave the confines of it. And again, that's what Lucifer did. Lucifer felt bound and chained to his position, his role. And he went, no, I might go and, you know, play the piano in a piano bar in London, in Soho. Like, he chose to be free and not be bound anymore. And Dream, we know, is shackled to his sense of duty. That was emphasized at the family dinner. His duty drives everything. And we're even told that in the summary. More so than any other sibling, except perhaps Destiny, Dream is driven by responsibility, by duty, by his role. And so we can see these shackles, these chains, and it becoming less and less comfortable for Dream to exist within that. He seems to be struggling against it now, the confines of who he is, how he has defined himself, that it is no longer a comfortable position. And, you know, we have a lot of those aspects being talked about. Even if we go back to Calliope, again, this idea of being shackled and bound, and then needing and trying to find freedom. There are a lot of stories about this that are running through the Sandman.
I like that. And Lucifer is locking up hell and giving the keys to Sandman is the origin story of the TV show Lucifer, right? No, I'm kidding.
It is.
It is, really?
That's,
like, I mean, that's the
Lucifer
premise, but is this where it originated?
Yeah, because Lucifer got a spin-off comic.
Oh,
and
okay.
the TV show was a very loose adaptation of what Lucifer did after he gave up being in hell.
Okay.
So
Makes sense.
the TV show is actually based on this origin story that Lucifer gave up running hell. That's why in the show you have Mazikeen is one of the characters. They're there.
Nice. I didn't know that. I was joking about it in my head, but I didn't know it was actually a thing.
Cool.
Cool. So, any other thoughts before we wrap up the discussion?
Well, one of the things I would say, again, we talk about that. This is a comic book. It is full of imagery. And something that is very difficult to talk about is what is being done in the images. And I would just say to people, like, don't just read the images as, or sorry, I wouldn't say to people, I would suggest to people that looking at the images as more than just an illustration of what is happening, but looking at it as coded information that has symbolism inherent in it, looking for similar color schemes used for different characters, for the framing. When the speech bubbles escape the frame of any particular panel, that it's actually extending into the gutter, and you see that the speech is breaking free of those confines. Look at the use of the gutter and the breaking of those frames, so images spill out, and how that might relate to an aspect of what the story in front of you is. There is some really compelling, very clever, really interesting use of narrative art. And we see so much of it in The Sandman. And quite often when we talk about it, we think of it in terms of the narrative events, what characters say. We treat it very much as a book, and we think about it in those terms. And we don't give the same due consideration to the imagery. And I think the imagery is important, which is, one of the reasons why I brought up one of the gates to hell is a CEO's office. That's just depicted in the background as they're locking things up. And it's the connection to hell is at the top of these business empires. What does that tell you? That those sorts of things that are all the way through it are a wonderful addition and layer of meaning to what is communicated in the Sandman. It's not just the dialogue, it's not just the exposition, and it's not just an illustration of what is happening. There's coded information, and it is so wonderful when you start seeing those patterns and parallels and connections.
I like that. I think I always read like subtitles. Sometimes even when watching movies, I read the subtitles and miss the picture. But I have to remind myself when reading comics to not do that, not just read past the text and move on. So yeah, I have to go back and look at the pictures of hell. But yeah, Philip, do you have anything to add or close us out?
No, really. I just want to thank you for hosting, Barsha. And I was going to thank AP, but I don't know if I really should. I mean, yeah, that's just wonderful. But no, this is a lot of fun. I really am loving the series, and I'm glad we're doing these discussions together, because it really does enrich my appreciation for what's going on in these really wonderful, rich, incredibly provocative stories that I'm being treated to in the series. So yeah, this is just a blast. So thank you both, and I'm looking forward to the next one.
Yeah. So the next one will be for issues 26 through 28, and will be on Philip's channel, right? Most probably. I think that's the rotation, but I guess we'll all put up links on our channels whenever they come out. So yeah, keep an eye out for that.
Sorry, would that be Philip's channel, the best of fantasy?
that Philip's channel, yes.
Famous
And-
channel. Yep.
Yeah. So thank you so much for listening and for joining us today, if you have been with us this far. And thank you both for joining me to discuss one of my favorite stories of all time. Yeah, we'll see everybody in a bit. Bye.